All right, former President Donald Trump is speaking to reporters as he heads into the courtroom for his criminal hush money trial.
A trial that is being looked upon, looked at all over the world, they're looking at it and analyzing it. Every legal pundit, every legal scholar said this trial is a disgrace. We have a Trump-hating judge. We have a judge who shouldn't be on this case. He's totally conflicted. But this is a trial that should never happen. It should have been thrown out a long time ago. If you look at Jonathan Turley, Andy McCarthy, all great legal scholars, there's not one that we've been able to find that said this should be a trial. I was paying a lawyer and marked it down as a legal expense. Some accountant, I didn't know, marked it down as a legal expense. That's exactly what it was. And you get indicted over that? I should be right now in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in many other states, North Carolina, Georgia, campaigning. This is all coming from the Biden White House because the guy can't put two sentences together. He can't campaign. They're using this in order to try and win an election, and it's not working that way. It's working the opposite way. So check that out. Legal expense. It's called legal expense. That's what you're supposed to call it. Mr. Trump, you get indicted on that. Nobody's ever seen it. Nobody has ever seen anything like it. So thank you very much for coming. I'm now going to sit down for many hours. I am now going to sit down. The voters understand it. All you have to do is look at the polls. This is a sham trial, and the judge should recuse himself because he's totally conflicted. Thank you very much.
All right, Donald Trump back in the New York City courtroom this morning. You just heard him there making statements. It's nothing different than what he said yesterday and what he said at the campaigns rallies that he's been holding. But today, he's back in court for a second day.
Can we just say he's clearly crafting this as, some sort of political persecution, blaming the Biden White House for this.
This is the Manhattan District Attorney.
This was unfolding long before there was a Biden White House, right? This is about campaign finance law having to do with 2016.
That's right.
So it has nothing to do with.
But he knows that it's going to run on television, and the people that he is speaking to, which is his base of supporters, are going to hear that, and that is the takeaway.
Yep,
right?
true.
The former president's required to be in court for the duration of this trial, which is still in the jury selection phase. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court will weigh the scope of a federal obstruction statute used to prosecute hundreds of January 6 rioters. It's a legal battle that could impact the election interference case against the former president. Let's bring in Scott MacFarlane to talk more about this. Scott, what are the arguments that are being weighed today?
Let me be clear. This is a pivotal day. There's no two ways about it for the largest criminal prosecution and investigation in U.S. history. They're arguing over one of the charges that more than 350 January 6 defendants have faced, obstruction of an official proceeding. That's a statute that came about in 2002 after the Enron scandal, and some of the January 6 defendants have argued it was an inappropriate inappropriate charge because it's a financial crime and a documents case.
So how many defendants are we talking about here?
1 in 3, Anne-Marie, 350 plus defendants impacted by this. Some have been convicted, some have pleaded guilty, some are in prison right now. If the high court throws out the charge, it could lead to early release for some of the defendants and the delaying of so many of the cases still to come. But what's more, Anne-Marie and Vlad, it's one of the charges Donald Trump faces and has pleaded not guilty to in the special counsel's 2020 election conspiracy case. It could further delay or shrink that case, too. The stakes are high, but all indications are the judges are skeptical of keeping this charge in place because it took 4 justices to agree to hear the arguments today. They would only need a 5th to strike it down.
All right, Scott, thank you. So here now to discuss Trump's criminal hush money trial is Thomas Dupree. He's the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Thanks for joining us. So the Supreme Court will weigh in today on if the January 6 rioters can be charged with obstruction of an official proceeding. What impact could this have on former President Donald Trump's case? Because he's also facing that charge.
Sure, it could have a big impact. the special counsel has charged former President Trump under this exact law that the Supreme Court is going to be hearing arguments about. So if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the defendants, if the Supreme Court says that the Justice Department overreached by charging the January 6th defendants under the statute, that probably would have the effect of knocking out a couple of the charges former President Trump faces in the January 6th case. It wouldn't knock out the entire case against Trump, but it would knock out a big chunk of it.
So let's talk about this trial in New York for the former president, Thomas. No jurors were chosen yesterday. The Trump camp is going to make the case that the trial should be moved out of New York City. And are we starting to see a little bit of why that perhaps might be the case?
Yeah, look, I think what we saw yesterday is that it is going to be very difficult to seat a jury that can be impartial and render justice in this case. We heard that about half the potential jurors, maybe even more, have already said there's no way they can judge this impartially. Now, look, the system is equipped to handle this. The judge and the lawyers will have a chance to question jurors, to weed out people whose political views make them inappropriate to serve on the jury, and other people who just can't judge this case impartially. I think what this underscores is it going to take time to choose a jury. The wheels of justice turn slowly. I think we can expect maybe a week or more of jury selection before testimony in this case even gets underway.
So the judge yesterday made several rulings for the defense and prosecution. There was some, I guess you can call them some housekeeping things that he had to take care of before they actually started to look at jury selection. I don't know if you heard what the former president had to say, but I think it's going to be like a regular occurrence where he kind of like attacks the judge before he goes in each morning, you know, has to have your breakfast, have your coffee, attack the judge, go right into the courtroom. What are your observations about the judge's handling of this case so far?
Well, first, I 100% agree with you. I think we should get accustomed to this being the normal practice. I think former President Trump is going to be launching daily attacks on the judge. The judge is going to be doing his best to keep his head down, keep proceedings on track. So far, I think what we've seen is that this is a judge who is very conscious of the historic nature of this case and all the difficulties that come with overseeing, you know, maybe the most prominent prosecution in our nation's history. And he's trying to handle this as much as possible as he would a normal case. He's made a bunch of threshold decisions about what sorts of evidence can come in and the like. He's given something to both sides. He's allowed the prosecutors to put in some evidence I know Trump would like to keep out of the case. On the other hand, he's also limited some pieces of evidence that I think the prosecution probably would have wanted to get in, but the defense team wants to keep out. Again, I think the judge is trying to handle this as best he can under extremely difficult, sometimes harrowing circumstances.
Thomas, before I let you go, let me ask you about something. Again, we saw the former president stand before the cameras there and reiterate a bunch of things that were simply not true. This is probably going to happen every single day until the end of this trial. And of course, all the news networks will take it because he's a former president. But the question I have to has to do with allowing cameras into the courtroom. Because now, if the American people could see with an unbiased lens what is actually happening in the courtroom, they would be able to form their own judgments, their own opinions about what is actually happening. Instead, the truth that happens in the courtroom will be filtered to the American people by whatever news organization or whatever outlet they use to get their news. In other words, if you go to a pro-Trump outlet or a right-leaning one, you're going to get the Trump position, which is what he just said in front of the cameras there. That's what those news organizations are going to parrot. So why not in this case allow cameras into the courtroom to allow the American people to see a former president on trial? This, to me, seems to be more important than anything. The Lindbergh case, OJ, I can't think of, I mean, why not this time?
I think those are all great arguments. And look, I agree with you 100% that I think the American public would benefit by being able to watch this trial and see it rather than have the proceedings basically filtered through the litigants themselves. I think in some cases, judges don't like having cameras in the courtroom because they think it would disrupt the proceedings or cause the lawyers to play to the cameras rather than focus on the court, and that it would just be a distraction and an interference. But look, there's no getting around it. This is a historic case. The American public obviously has a very substantial interest in knowing about what's going on in that courtroom. So I think there is an extremely compelling case that cameras should be allowed or should have been allowed in this trial.
And that won't change, right? That the judge has decided and it's not going to happen.
That's certainly what it looks like. Look, I mean, I suspect if this judge wanted to change course, he could make it happen. But I think he's been pretty clear that this is not going to be a televised trial. We're going to have to rely on reporters and, frankly, the parties themselves to tell us what actually happened.
All right. Thomas Dupree, always great to have your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.